I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo. Good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to those of you on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantabulous co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are going to bring you an hour of unforgettable radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families, and the birds and the bees and the trees and the little bacteria that make cheese, and pretty much everybody and everything, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up in this little ball called Earth. And we have a great show for you today, as usual. This is our first live show of 2026, which begins our 7th year of For a Green Future, if you can believe it. We're kind of
Birthday to us.
Yes, we are kind of in the future that we started talking about 7 years.
Kinda,
We've
yeah.
Made it into a good chunk of that.
It's not that green, but
Not that green, but there's good things going on. There's definitely some things that are better than they were 7 years ago. So we're going to just chat for another 10 minutes or so here, and then we have a special guest calling in. Cathy Cowan Becker is calling in, and some of you may remember she was on just about a month ago talking about this terrible thing that American Electric Power was trying to do. Well, we have a rare bit of good news. Instead of an interview about something terrible that might be about to happen, we can actually have a report about something great, a victory. Basically, we got a victory in that situation, so that'll be nice. Then after we talk to Cathy Cowan Becker, we're going to hear from our advertisers and patrons, to whom we are eternally grateful. And then Rebecca, it'll be your turn at the mic. What are you going to talk about this week?
I'm going to talk about snowy owls.
Snowy owls, very appropriate for today's weather.
Yep.
And by the way, driving in, it was some of the side streets are just like sheer ice. If a road hasn't been salted, it's icy. So be very careful when you're driving this morning.
And when you're walking, for that matter.
Yes. And then after we hear about snowy owls from Rebecca, it's ecological news from around the world. We've got a lot of interesting, local reporting, and there's an HB6 update, believe it or not. I mean, I guess it's appropriate in the 7th year of our show that we're going to talk about HB6 again. One of the things that we talked about in the very first show, and this one's a blockbuster. It's just this critical thing about HB6 that you're going to have to wait and hear about it, because it's just one of those things that kind of blows your mind. Okay, so anyway, as I said, it's cold and icy today, but we are actually only 1 degree below average, so this is pretty much normal January weather. But just a few days ago, actually, we broke records. On Friday, we were around here. We were over 60 degrees. We had 61, 62 degrees in the Toledo region, which was a new record. And just a reminder again, just because it's cold today doesn't mean there's no global warming. I know the vast majority of you believe that, but I'm talking to that. It's down to like 24% now who still deny global warming. So the majority that accepts it keeps getting bigger, and the minority keeps getting smaller, but they they also seem to be getting more and more, how should I say, strident about it. So just a reminder that if you have a day like today, which is one below average, but a day like Friday, which was more than 20 degrees above average, taken together, that means things are getting warmer. Right?
Yep.
That's how global warming works. Not a straight line, it's a squiggly line, but the squiggle is going upwards. There's no question about it. But I took advantage of some of that warm weather, though, to go for a nice walk. Went along the towpath trail there in Maumee, and I happened upon a scene that was really cool that I wanted to share with you. Right there in the middle of the afternoon, there was a herd of deer, and there were 2 bucks, and there were about 8 does, and the 2 bucks were going at it. They had the horns.
Oh
And
my.
they were, locking the horns, but they were doing it kind of, I don't know, they were being kind of ginger about it. They weren't like, it's kind of more like,
Let's just figure out who's bigger and stronger, and then we can both go home.
yeah, that was
Right.
kind of how it felt. But of course, one of them was clearly bigger than the other. Not by a lot, but, definitely we could tell who the bigger, badder buck was.
Mm-hmm.
And the does were all just hanging around grazing. They all looked kind of bored, frankly.
Yeah.
But then,
Sounds about right.
But then what happened is a third buck appeared.
Oh no,
Yeah.
drama.
There was
The
drama.
plot
It
sickens.
did, because this third buck, even though his horns weren't near as nice as either of the other 2,
Mm-hmm.
the does reacted immediately, and
Ooh.
there were about 8 does, and 2 of them saw this new buck and just took off. They're
Oh
like,
my.
I don't have anything to do with this guy. And then the most of the rest of them plunked down on the ground. They had been grazing, and they just plunked down you're not getting any of this. fella."
There you go.
Right.
Okay, they didn't like that guy.
But one of the does
Uh-huh.
actually was like, "Oh, hey," and trotted right
All
over
right.
to him. And so the big doe the big buck who was involved in the the back and forth with that other slightly smaller buck, now he started getting, it was kind of like, oh, now I've got a buck on this side
No.
and I've got a buck on that side.
What does he do?
Well, actually what he did was he noticed us watching,
Okay.
because we had been standing there
Right.
just watching this unfold, and all of a sudden, so the buck turned his attention towards us, what are you looking at? And so we left.
Yeah.
You don't hang around when
No,
a buck
no.
with big antlers turns his attention towards you. But it was just this really cool, whenever you go out in nature, you don't really know what you're going to find. You don't, it's very unpredictable, but it was really cool. It was fascinating, and so, this was taking advantage of the warm weather, but don't be afraid to get out even in the cold weather. There's a lot of cool things that happen in the cold too. But yeah, so if anybody has any other observations they've had of nature lately, or if maybe one thing I wanted to ask you folks about is, do you have any ecological New Year's resolutions? Is this the year you're finally gonna, I don't know, get solar panels, get the electric car, insulate your house? Do you have any eco resolutions? And call in. You can call in at 877-909-1007, or you can text at 419-973-5841. And we actually got a nice text over the break. We had our little New Year's break there, and a listener texted in and said, thank you for all you do. And they started listening to us in Columbus. Then they moved to Cincinnati, and they're still
Wow.
listening
Cool.
to us. So
Thanks for listening.
And thanks for that nice feedback, that nice text message. Text go to 419-973-5841. And again, the call-in number is 877-909-1007. So my New Year's eco resolution is this is the year I am going to get the geothermal heating on the house.
Nice.
Okay. I don't care what it takes in terms of getting a loan or whatever, but this was always our plan, my wife and me, and things kept coming up that kind of, we didn't have the money for it at that time, but it's time. Things are getting so bad on the national policy level that we really need to individually do everything we can. And I'm happy to report that some of my friends, a fair number of my friends, are making the switch. They're getting electric cars. They're putting solar on their roofs.
Because you just feel like things are going to start breaking down pretty soon, probably including the power grid. You just have that feeling.
Well, they do keep warning us that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more stresses on the grid lately than there should be, and it doesn't help any that the Trump administration's forcing like these aging coal plants to stay open. These coal plants that because they're already like 100 years old, they break down all the time.
Yeah.
And once one of those drops out, just like a nuke plant, when you've got like a gigawatt of power dropping out with no warning, it threatens the whole grid. The whole grid can collapse. And so that's becoming more and more likely as time is going on. So, yeah, battery backup with solar, I think, is becoming the places where that is becoming common, like Texas and California. As that happens more and more often, those grids get more and more stable because now you've got these distributed batteries over, thousands and thousands of them. So even if like all the power drops, like, if for some reason every power plant goes down, these houses with their batteries can, theoretically, we can get it to the point where there's enough of those batteries where they could completely kick in and take over and run the grid until the power can come back on. So we keep getting closer and closer to that. The more and more people put solar and battery on their houses. The batteries do about double the price, almost double the price. So, it's a kind of thing where you can do it step by step. You can first put the panels on, then put the batteries on, and you could put some panels on one year and then add more panels the next. But the thing is, we have to get started. We have to make this transition, and it's not going to be made for us. That's definitely becoming clearer and clearer as the government keeps doing worse and worse energy policies. And speaking of energy policies, as we reported back in December, that actually it was November, that AEP tried to sneak in the elimination of what's called net metering. And we helped, among many others, helped raise sort of the outcry against that. And our guest today, Cathy Cowan Becker, is going to talk to us a little bit more about that. So, Cathy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. So, I'm having a little trouble here. Yes, so be nice and loud.
Let's see if I can try. How is this? Is this better?
Yeah, that's good. All right. So, Cathy, tell us about what PUCO has decided.
Yes. So back in at literally the evening, 4:30 p.m., the day before Thanksgiving, AEP sent a comment into a PUCO case. The case was just the regular 5-year review of net metering rules. So any administrative rule, every 5 years it gets reviewed. And the PUCO staff had recommended no changes to the law, just keep it as it is. And, net metering, I think, as Joe explained, is how if you have solar panels on your roof or somewhere else, you get credit for the power you put on the grid. Those panels generate power, and your house may use some of that power, however much of that power it needs while it's being generated, but often it generates way more than you're actually using in your home at that moment. So those electrons go back out onto the grid. and AEP or whoever is managing the grid then sells them to someone else. So you should get credit for those electrons on your bill, and currently under net metering law, you do. So what I mentioned, AEP at 4:30 p.m. the day before Thanksgiving filed a comment on this review of the net metering rules, basically that would make it, asking for changes that would make it much more difficult for people to get compensated for the energy they put on the grid. Their comment basically asked only if you have AEP as your energy supplier. AEP manages the wires that go into the homes and into the buildings, and then they also separately have a generation or work with generators to get power to put on the grid. So AEP is saying only if you are a customer of our generation would you get compensated. If you're a customer of anyone else's generation, you wouldn't. And Ohio has the Apple to Apple site where people can go on and get electricity from any supplier. So a lot of people who happen to have the wires that AEP manages don't have AEP as a supplier. For example, where I live in Hilliard City has a 100% renewable aggregation program with Dynegy Energy. So I don't get power from AEP, so I would not be compensated for net metering under the rules that AEP came up with.
Huh.
So
AEP
we
would
started telling...
AEP would take your electricity and sell it, because it doesn't just disappear once it goes on the grid. They would take that power and sell it without compensating you for it.
Exactly. Yeah. So then that would take it a lot longer for me to get, people put on solar panels, and it is a big expense up front. But you save on your power bill, and then so you're paid back over time, and within 6-8 years you reach payback status. Well, it would take a long time, much longer, to reach that payback status under AEP's proposal, and so even fewer people would put solar panels on their homes than currently do.
Yeah. Just to focus on that for a second. So it takes about 6 to 8 years to make the money back that you've invested in the panels, if you have the net metering, but then the panels last like 25 years, right? So
yeah, exactly. They can. I mean, I know people have had solar panels that have lasted. They've put them on 40 years previous, and they're still going.
Yeah. So in the long run, you do it's not a get rich quick scheme, but in the long run, you do actually do pretty well, as long as there is net metering.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So they did this dastardly last minute day before Thanksgiving thing. I mean, it was literally last minute, right? It was like 4 p.m. or something like that.
Yes, and the deadline to comment, the first deadline to comment was the day after Thanksgiving. So we had 2 days of the holiday Thanksgiving break to tell people about this, to explain what net metering is, and to get them to comment and say, no, we don't think that, we think PUCO should keep the rules as they are and not do AEP's proposal. And we did, over that holiday break, get in about 100 comments to that effect.
Okay.
So, and then there was some back and forth. The way the PUCO rules work is, then that's the first deadline, and then everyone, and that's their comments, and then everyone can reply specifically to comments that have been made, some the more official comments from like the big organizations. So then we had maybe another week and a half to get in replies to AEP. So we did another round of trying to get, like, at that point, Save Ohio Parks sent out an action alert and had a sample comment asking people to replying specifically to AEP's comment.
I see. So you can,
and we generated
comments on the comments. There's a little window.
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Okay.
It's like a 2-part, but if you don't make a comment the first round in that 2-day window, then you can't do it in the second round. So that was why it was important to get comments in that first round.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we got about 275 comments in total, according to the PUCO, and people who know this process inside and out, who I talked with, said that that's a huge number of comments for this is an administrative regulatory proceeding on fairly arcane administrative law. And she said that was the most comments she'd ever seen on anything like that. So,
Okay,
so we did that, and the PUCO staff just last week issued its decision and said, nope, we're going to keep the rules as they are.
Yes.
So we won this one.
Very nice, complete victory. Yeah, that's cool. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's really nice to win one, because you know as well as anyone how this state is so heavily tipped in favor and rigged in favor of oil and gas. And for once, the renewable energy forces, prevailed in this case.
That's great. All right. Well, so there was that moment of savoring victory, but I guess there's already another big battle on the horizon, right? The immediate horizon. You want to tell us what's going on with the Oil and Gas Land Management Commission?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And so this is happening tomorrow. So just to explain what the Oil and Gas Land Management Commission is, this is the commission that makes decisions about whether or not to frack our state parks, wildlife areas, and public lands, any public land. So I'll just start at the beginning. Back in 2011, Ohio passed a law that said state agencies may lease land to the oil and gas companies for fracking, and that would include state parks, any kind of public land. And at that time, there was such a sustained outcry from Ohioans that the governors of those times backed off. And that law set up this commission, this Oil and Gas Land Management Commission, to oversee the process of leasing public lands for fracking. But there was such an outcry that Governor Kasich, for example, didn't name anyone to that commission, and it wasn't operating. DeWine, when he first got in, did name some people, but it wasn't meeting, wasn't doing anything. So then in 2020, the lame duck session of 2022, where nothing good happens in lame duck, the legislature piled up a bunch of oil and gas amendments on a completely unrelated bill about poultry chicks. And one of those amendments changed that word may to shall, and that basically mandated fracking of public lands, at least until such time as this commission met and created rules for how they would hear these nominations. So in early 2023, the commission did just that. They created those rules. Those rules got into place on May 28th, 2023. And immediately a dozen nominations came in, mostly for parks and wildlife areas. And since then, they've heard, probably 50, 60 some nominations. They've approved 14 nominations to frack parks and wildlife areas, Salt Fork State Park being the only park so far, and 6 different wildlife areas. These are large tracts of land. And then also 14 areas along state highways. But this commission, for whatever reason, and we don't know, but we weren't going to complain about it, their last meeting was last May, so like 8 months ago. And so a number of nominations have piled up. In the meantime, there was also a bill called House Bill 308 that passed, it passed in 2024. And so that bill changed the standard lease term from 3 years to 5 years for fracking public land, which meant there were changes on the lease that had been approved through that administrative rules process I mentioned. And so because of that, they have to hold a public hearing. And so that public hearing and the meeting to consider these pending nominations, both of those meetings are tomorrow. And at this public hearing, we can speak. And so once the rules were put into place, we got to testify about the rules because that was an administrative rule. But once those were in place, they went into what they call business meetings, where they consider these nominations. And we're not allowed to speak at those. So we have lots of people who show up, who hold signs, who let their voices be known, but there's no testimony when they're talking about fracking 5,000 acres of Salt Fork State Park or 4,000 acres of Egypt Valley Wildlife Area. We're not allowed to speak. We are allowed. They do take written comments for a time. There's a 45-day window where people can do written comments. And at Save Ohio Parks, we always send those out to people and say, here, comment on this. This nomination is open. Please go comment. And hundreds of Ohioans do. So I just checked yesterday, added this up. We've had over 7,000 people submit comments about fracking these various types of public lands since this whole process started. Thousands of Ohioans. And the comments run like 99% opposed. It's very unanimous. The people do not want this done. So we're going to be showing up tomorrow at the public hearing to say why we don't think leases should be extended from 3 years to 5 years. We don't think this public land should be fracked at all. The people are very against this. And then we get to stay for one of their business meetings where they're going to consider literally 20 nominations for fracking parks, wildlife areas. I think there are no parks, but there are wildlife areas and then lands like rights-of-way along a highway, but 20 different nominations of that. And so you really see how this state works and how rigged the game is, because this commission just rubber stamps a lot of this. And when we've talked to them about that, like off the record, they keep telling us, well, this is what the legislature told us to do. In so many words, that's what they said, is we have to do this because that's what the legislature wants. But according to the law, there are 9 different factors they have to consider, of which the public comments is one of those factors. Along with environmental impact, geological impact. Is this compatible to the uses of this land? I would say fracking is not compatible to a wildlife area or a park, and so on. And they never discuss any of this. They just pound through these nominations. We've seen meetings that are literally 7 minutes, and they just take one vote after another on like 4 or 5 nominations. And, that's the definition of rubber stamping. Yeah. So we're going to make it uncomfortable for them to do that, because we're going to have a lot of people in the room, and we're going to have it on the record that the people of Ohio do not want this.
Right.
So that's what's going on tomorrow.
And that desire to protect the parks, and let's be clear that this process of fracking does cause all kinds of environmental damage, right? There's leaks and there's clearing of wild areas, and you got to put like cement pads in the middle of everything. And and the desire to protect our parks and our wildlife areas from that cuts across all Ohioans' like philosophies, right? This is not a conservative versus liberal thing. This is a save nature versus destroy nature thing.
Yeah, very much. So, we've worked with hunting groups, for example, and, anyone who wants a quiet park, or anyone who wants a wildlife area to go bird watch, or if they want to hunt, if they want to fish or bird watch or just be in nature, and our parks that's what they're for. And fracking is just incompatible with that. Like you said, each frack pad it's anywhere from 5 to 20 acres. They take down the trees and put a cement pad on there. It's very loud. It has a lot of it's noise pollution and also light pollution at night. It's all lit up. There's a lot of air pollution, and the fracking process takes literally millions of gallons of water. For I think 40 million gallons of water is what's allowed per well, up to 40. Some of them are 60. It's different amounts, but it's like 40 to 60 million. They take that right out of the freshwater sources nearby, streams, lakes, so forth. They lace it with sand and toxic chemicals. They inject it deep in the ground at very high pressure, where it just almost explodes the rock underground. And then when all that comes back, it brings up oil and gas, but it also brings up radioactive elements. And that water, these billions of gallons of waste, has to be disposed of. It can't enter the water cycle again. So it's incredible how much of our fresh water it takes and turns into toxic waste. And then that's injected in the ground in what they call injection wells. And those wells are known to leak. It doesn't stay there. The water is under high pressure underground, and it ends up migrating, and it migrates into other production wells, into orphan wells, and in some cases, into drinking water wells.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just an extremely polluting and invasive process
And that even
that should
sometimes
not be anywhere near our parks.
sometimes those injection wells even cause earthquakes, right?
Yes, we looked. We have a research report about that from one of our interns this summer. A frack well in injection wells in Mahoning County several years ago were shut down due to earthquakes, and then a production fracking well in Noble County was shut down this summer due to earthquakes.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
So you can imagine there. And if you think about what kind of chemicals are in this water that they inject at high pressure, it's like oily stuff that's meant to break apart rock, to get rock to fall apart. Well, it's just tailor-made to create earthquakes underground. So that's what it does.
All right. Well, Cathy, thanks so much for coming on. It's nice to have a little celebration there, even if the next challenge is immediately happening. But how do people follow what you folks are doing and see what's happening with these issues?
So if you want to learn more about the meetings tomorrow and perhaps attend, it's in Columbus, or you can send in a written comment. We have all the instructions on saveohioparks.org, and then if you tap the Join Us tab on that website, you can fill out that form and we'll add you to our email list.
All right. Thanks so much, Cathy.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. All right. That was Cathy Cowan Becker.
I did not know it's like the chemicals that actually like dissolve the rock or like break up the rock that cause the earthquakes. I just assumed it was somehow to do with the pressure or something,
Well, yeah, it does directly attack the rock, and it lubricates.
My goodness.
And so if you have like a fault line that's been inactive for a million years, and all of a sudden you put this chemical that's designed to let rocks like move around.
Right. They're going to do that.
The fault's going to go,
right.
Time to stretch a little here.
There we go.
And so you get earthquakes that can damage foundations of houses for literally miles around.
Right.
So, these frackers are making money. Well, actually, they're not all making money. A lot of them are actually going bankrupt. But they are supposedly profiting while they're literally destroying the homes of the people in the region.
They're really just gambling. They're not even necessarily profiting.
Yes, that's very true. Okay, well, now it's time to hear from our wonderful, wonderful patrons and sponsors. For Green Futures brought to you by the Wood County Park District.
Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place? It's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future.
Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature, your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or give us a call, 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And For Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And those are wonderful, wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. There they searched for Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They scroll down through the different membership levels, or they pick their own membership level. And every month now, a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. So thank you to our patrons. Okay, Rebecca, your turn to take over. What do we got?
All right. Well, I decided to do snowy owls this week because my friend Tyler thinks they're cool.
Snowy owls. Yeah, they are cool.
Yeah. Their Latin name is Bubos scandiacus, probably. They're native to the Arctic tundra and are diurnal hunters, which just means day hunters. I did not know that. I thought diurnal was going to turn out to be something terribly complicated, but it's just the opposite of nocturnal, it turns out.
Right.
Which is pretty unusual among owls. I think they're the only owls that hunt during the day. They're essentially just large white owls with big yellow eyes, and they have some little speckly markings, which are darker in the case of the females. And they eat small rodents, birds, rabbits, and fish, mostly hunting them from perching on low posts or by flying low to the ground. The females have darker markings, and I said that already. And they migrate south in the winter, so you might see some south of the Arctic at some point. They nest in shallow scrapes on the ground, sometimes in little raised areas, so little hummocks. I think somebody used the word. Conservation status, according to the IUCN, is vulnerable, which is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. That's what it is. I'm trying to remember that one. And the National U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service classifies them as of conservation concern. So the benefits of snowy owls to the ecology, to the environment, are major because they control Arctic lemmings and other rodents, which otherwise would eat all the grass and damage the tundra vegetation, and then the caribou wouldn't have anything to eat, and it would be bad. So they eat like 1,600 lemmings and voles yearly are eaten by snowy owls. And that prevents something called a trophic cascade, which is changes with the top predator, or regarding the top predator, which ripple down through the food web, changing the behavior of organisms at the lower levels. And let me see. I think the example they used with the Yellowstone wolves, they brought back the wolves, and then the grazing animals started getting all nervous and moving around more often, and the willows started doing better as a result. And then the beavers started using them to build dams again. So you can see that was kind of A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. So that is how trophic cascades work. New term. I think it's related. I think troph means nutrition, possibly, because
It's energy.
Energy, okay.
Levels.
Because is it related, like I think it is, to the word eutrophication? Or not?
I'm sure the root is in there, yeah.
Yeah, probably. So too much nutrients sort of equal energy for living things. And some threats to snowy owls would include climate change, which affects their prey and their habitat. Also, habitat loss and collisions with cars, power lines, and even planes sometimes. Also, pesticide poisoning and human disturbance. They specifically said in one of the things I read, give them some space if you're owl watching, because they are under some stress. It's cold, they're hungry, Don't make them nervous on top of that.
Yeah, they're a big bird. Yeah,
Yep.
Lots of cool owl info. All right, thank you, Rebecca.
Welcome.
All right, so now it's time for ecological news, and our first story comes from our friends at Beyond Nuclear, beyondnuclear.org. This went on their website on January 2nd, and it is Halo misses Palisades restart. So we've been following the Palisades nuclear plant up there in Michigan that was a plant that was closed for decommissioning, and then the decommissioning company said, we're just going to reopen it. We're not going to decommission it. That's Holtec. And like all nuclear plants, they are already behind schedule.
You had one job, Holtec. You were supposed to close it down.
Yes, that was what they should still be doing.
Opening it back up is not closing it down.
Right. But they had an end of the 2025 deadline. Well, actually, initially they said they were going to get it done like in July, then August, then November, then December, and now they're saying March, maybe. So hopefully the delays just keep going and they never actually open it, because that's better than actually getting it started again.
Yes, nobody wants that. Nobody needs that.
But it just came out, and they reported in this posting on their website that Holtec had originally told the Biden administration that they would have it open before the election in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're getting billions of dollars in tax or in subsidies from both the federal and state government. And so what Biden and Whitmer thought they would have is this wonderful photo op before the November elections, standing in front of a restarted nuclear plant. Well, they they should remember that the nuclear industry always lies.
Yeah, anything that they say is most likely a crock, because we have noticed that their lips are moving, which is a giveaway.
Yeah, that's the kind of. But that was a secret. There was a secret memo to the Department of Energy, so that secured them some of their billions. They've gotten $3.5 billion before. So the owner of Holtec, Singh is his name, is rolling in dough, Scrooge McDuck style, but he wants $12 billion more, because he's like, yeah, 3.5 billion. That's hardly anything, really. So the restart is going very badly, and in fact, back in October, they had a hydrazine spill, which is a highly toxic chemical, and they immediately said to all the people around, "Oh, this won't hurt your drinking water or anything," but they also didn't do any testing and didn't offer any proof that hydrazine poisoning isn't going to hurt anything. So our friends at Beyond Nuclear are suing to stop the restart because basically they, as we said, they promised to do a shutdown. They promised to do a decommissioning. And so to then say, no, actually we're going to recommission and not decommission.
See, D and re are actually opposites.
Yes, it doesn't matter. There's only one letter difference.
It's not the same thing.
And so basically what Beyond Nuclear and some of the other organizations that are suing are saying, this is not just false pretenses, it's a whole new licensing procedure.
Right.
They should start over again in the licensing process. They can't reactivate a license which had already been shut down. So that's that story. Let's hope our friends there prevail. And now the big blockbuster news story, the HB6 update, which, if you had told me...
He wouldn't even tell me before the show so he could get my honest reaction.
Yes, I wanted
Very
to
excited.
get your reaction to this. If you had told me 7 years ago I would be still doing HB6 updates, I would not have believed you. But Ohio Capitol Journal, January 9th, and basically what's happening is Larry Householder, the ex-Speaker of the House, who's in prison right now.
Nothing good ever comes after that man's name.
Yeah. He's in prison right now for taking $65 million in bribes. And his accomplice, Borges, have appealed their conviction to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Oh, Lord.
And here's the shocking part. Their argument before the Supreme Court is that bribery should be legal.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah. Yeah, they are essentially saying that if a corporation goes to a politician and says, I'm going to give you $65 million, and you're going to give me a law that gives me $1 billion of ratepayer money, which is what HB6 was, that's just free speech.
Oh, Lord.
You're freely talking about bribing someone, and that shouldn't be limited by things like laws against bribery. And so what's happening, they already tried this argument at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they lost. And so, the Sixth Circuit said, no, you're guilty. You broke the law. You bribed somebody.
Having to do with seashells at the seashore here, the Sixth Circuit.
Same principle operating there.
Okay.
But if this, so what happens is the Supreme Court has until January 28th to decide if they're going to take the case. And 4 out of the 9 have to agree, yes, we'll take this case. And if they do, that means it's going to go before the Supreme Court, or the Supreme Court's going to make a decision on it. And we have to remember that some of the Supreme Court members are, sure looks like they're taking these kinds of bribes. I mean, this is what people they're being accused of by, for example, what's his name? Not Alito, although there's been suggestions that he's taking things from corporations like, real estate and things like that. But Clarence Thomas famously was given a mobile home by a billionaire buddy of his, and so, who had cases in front of the Supreme Court that Clarence Thomas then did not recuse himself of. And so there's strong suggestion that things like these bribery laws, some of our Supreme Court justices could conceivably be called in violation of those already, and now we're off. This lawsuit offers them a chance to get rid of bribery laws, to get rid of the crime of bribery altogether. And so basically we've all got to cross our fingers and hold our breaths until January 28th, because if the Supreme Court chooses to hear this, that could be sort of the last barrier to just having a completely corrupt government. And so that's my big, breaking news, my big, because the implications of that go far beyond just the nuclear power.
Yeah.
They cover literally every aspect of our economy and ecology.
Why are we surprised even surprised that they're leading the charge? For more corruption, for the legalization of corruption.
That whole Householder and Borges.
Yeah. Just the law is going to be now just rich people do whatever they want.
Yeah, I worked at Attica for a while. I was in a college program that was like giving Attica people a chance to get associate's degrees, and I'll never forget there was a fella in there. We were having a debate about legalizing marijuana, like relaxing some drug laws. And at one point while we were all just sort of discussing this as part of their class, this was an assignment, he goes, well, all I did was throw somebody off a bridge.
Right.
I don't think that should be illegal.
He was probably getting on his nerves, he had his reasons.
Yeah, well, he did, exactly.
Yeah.
He had his reasons, and I was kind of like, no, I think that would still be illegal even if we legalized marijuana.
Yeah.
But, so
But
bribery.
the difference is you can, smoke some marijuana and calm down when you feel like throwing someone off a bridge.
Yeah. So getting rid of things like, there's some important crimes that should always be crimes, including bribery. So, all right, that's our big story. The next story, locally, there's been a lot of talking about data centers, a lot of controversy about data centers. There was a planning commission meeting for Wood County back on January 5th, and Wood County is where Meta is currently building a huge data center, like an 850-acre campus. And that meeting was packed with about 150 people. I actually attended that meeting, and people are very angry about the fact that center was put in place essentially under cover of secrecy.
Yep.
Because apparently there were non-disclosure agreements signed, and nobody got to know who was building it or how big it was going to be. And the Planning Commission members kept repeating, all we do is make recommendations to the township boards. We don't make any actual decisions. We can't place something like a moratorium on future things. He said, you got to go talk to the townships. And
let me guess, they said all we do is what that other board tells us to do.
Well, what happened was that a lot of the people who went to that meeting on the 5th then did go to the township meetings in Middleton and Perrysburg. So there were like 150 people at the one. There were they pretty much they split. There was about 80 at either of the next, because the very next day is when Middleton and Perrysburg had their meetings. And the Middleton Township people said, oh, well, we can't do a moratorium, can we? Oh, we're going to do some research before we do a moratorium.
Of course.
But of course, the purpose for having a moratorium is to do the research about these data centers and what their effects are on the environment, because essentially they could use so much water. They can use up to 500 million gallons a day.
Good Lord.
And the Meta people are saying, oh, we're using closed loop, so we're only going to use 30 to 50,000 gallons a day. But there's nothing that forces future data centers to do that. And, so what you need legislation. You need rules saying, okay, all data centers must have closed loop cooling, because otherwise they'll take that 500 million or that 500 million gallons and you, won't have enough money to do other things like drink water in your municipality. So you do the moratorium in order to do the research to see what you have to have in place before these things start going, because as we found with the Meta, if you just let them in first, then you're kind of at their mercy. Then they get to do whatever they want because there are no regulations. One of the things they're going to try to do is put in a brand new natural gas plant. They actually put that request in. There was a notice in the Sentinel Tribune back in November that I missed completely, unfortunately, with a 10-day public comment period that nobody caught. So now they're planning to put in a natural gas plant, which of course puts in tons of CO2. Is all kinds of noisy. It puts out particulate matter, microsoot that's going to hurt people in the surrounding area. And that's the kind of thing, the thing everybody in that room agreed on is they don't want to lose the rural nature of Wood County. And a lot of them said, I moved here specifically because it's a nice, quiet, rural place, and we don't want it turned into kind of this noisy thing full of lights and pollution. That's not why we're living in Wood County. And so hopefully the township boards will start doing moratoriums. The Planning Commission kind of suggested they might write a letter to the township board suggesting that they do put moratoriums into place, but there was no firm commitment on that. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. But there's ways you can have things like data centers. Like we found out from Mark Jacobson that if there's so much behind the meter solar in California now that even though they're the third highest state in terms of the number of data centers, their electricity demand has actually dropped 2%.
Excellent.
Because there's so much behind the meter rooftop. So maybe we need to require that before we get the data centers.
It's a thought.
All right, but on to our next story. Got to pick up the pace here now. Trump has withdrawn from 66 organizations, international organizations, just unilaterally. Some of those withdrawals may be illegal, like his withdrawal from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, because that was actually approved by the Senate 92-0.
Yeah.
So there's a big question if he even has the authority to do that. But he also withdrew from a whole bunch of other things. A lot of those were environmental organizations, but there's 66 organizations he withdrew from, and they included international organizations that worked against violence against children. So apparently he's all for violence against children now.
Spiffy.
The Population Fund, the UN Population Fund, the Education Fund. There's an organization called Education Cannot Wait that we've withdrawn from. The Global Counterterrorism Forum.
Oh my!
I mean,
oh dear.
Why would you withdraw from a counterterrorism organization?
You gotta wonder, don't you?
The International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance.
Okay.
So no fan of democracy there.
Okay.
The International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law. Okay, so that's probably...
I'm becoming increasingly concerned.
That's probably the most telling.
Yeah.
And then, a whole bunch of environmental ones like organizations that fought lead and zinc poisoning.
Of course.
Promoted solar power, tried to limit the destruction of tropical rainforests, and the Cherry was an organization that fought international piracy.
Oh, okay.
We're no longer we don't long we,
International piracy, totally cool now. According
Exactly.
to Trump, yay.
According to Trump,
Okay,
yeah, and
great.
there may be some reasons for that he might have chosen to do
because
that.
we've been randomly
We're
gunning
kinda
down ships.
Pirating ourselves are.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I remember.
Okay, just 2 more stories and 2 more minutes. So here we go. 2025, unfortunately, the question is always, are we changing to non-carbon fast enough? The answer, unfortunately, is no. 2025 was another record for CO2, despite the massive renewables build out. U.S. CO2 has increased 1.9%, and India went up 1.4%. China only went up 0.4%, but because they're such a big emitter of CO2, that's still, lots of gigatons. Aviation was the largest area where the CO2 emissions went up the most and went up 6.8%. And so we're at 425.7 million parts per million of CO2 versus 2013, we were only down there at 300 and some. So, yeah, we're not doing good. But to end, final story, and to end on an upbeat note, energy investment finances last year, 2.2 trillion were invested in renewable energies, and only 1.1 trillion in fossil fuels. So, still signs that we can make the shift and that we are going to do it. Fingers are crossed, breath is held, wood is knocked on. Let's do this, folks. So follow a Eco New Year's resolution, put some solar panels on your house, or do something to help us get out of this hole we're in.
If nothing else, it's uncertain times. You probably want to be self-sufficient just in case, if you can.
There you go. Selfish reasoning. So that's it for this show. Thank you so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
We are signing off.
It's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more 3-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!